Raven's life shattered when she threw a surprise birthday party, only to find her boyfriend cheating. Heartbroken and homeless, she becomes the clumsy, invisible assistant to the arrogant billionaire, Preston Hayes. He never gave her a second glance until a business trip to the Bahamas. When he sees her by the pool in a bikini, laughing with another man, it ignites a possessive fire. Suddenly, the man who never even noticed her is consumed by jealousy. If you love dramatic love stories, subscribe to the channel now. Leave your like and activate the bell. And now get ready, because the story is about to begin. The apartment was impeccable. Gold and black balloons floated across the ceiling. The dining table gleamed with perfectly aligned wine glasses, and the aroma of freshly cooked food filled the air. Raven looked at Chloe, her best friend, and gave a nervous smile. After weeks of planning, everything was ready. This was going to be the perfect night to celebrate Mark's 30th birthday. Friends were hiding behind the sofa, buzzing with anticipation. A few of them held colorful party poppers, ready to unleash confetti and streamers into the air. Then, toward the sound of a key turning in the lock, Raven felt her heart pound. Everyone got into position. The door swung open. "Surprise!" they shouted in unison as the air filled with confetti and laughter. But in a single second, the atmosphere shifted. Mark walked in, his lips locked with those of an unknown woman, an intense, careless kiss, as if the rest of the world didn't exist. He only pulled away when he heard the voices and saw the confetti raining down around them. The woman, in a short red dress, looked at everyone with a mix of embarrassment and arrogance, as if daring anyone to judge her. A stone-cold silence fell over the room. The confetti was still drifting through the air, but no one was smiling anymore. Mark raised his eyebrows, surprised, staring at Raven. Weren't you supposed to be out of town?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. The cake she was holding trembled in her hands, and the party she had prepared with so much love. Now it felt like a nightmare. One by one, the guests started to leave. No one knew what to say, not even Chloe, who on her way out cast a worried glance back at Raven. Now see, the apartment was silent. All that remained were a few pieces of confetti on the floor, and the smell of cold food. Raven stood in the hallway with a packed suitcase by her side. Her face was still pale, her eyes dry. She had no more tears left to cry. Mark leaned the door shut and let out an ironic laugh. "So that's it? You're just going to walk out like you're the victim?" He took a step toward her. "You embarrassed me in front of our friends, Raven." She blinked, stunned. "I embarrassed you?" "Yes, you did," he said, his voice rising. "You broke into my apartment through this circus, and then you humiliated me in front of everyone." Raven remained silent. Inside, every part of her was screaming. But on the outside, she just took a deep breath. "I didn't break into anything, Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "I lived here for 3 years, and all I ever did was love you." He looked away and pulled out his phone as if he couldn't care less. So dramatic. "You were always good at that." Raven looked down at her suitcase. She gripped the handle firmly, and without another word, she walked to the door. As she passed him, her shoulder almost brushed against his, but she didn't look back. The door closed, and with it, an entire chapter of Raven Gomes's life closed too. A fine but cutting rain was falling. Every drop that hit Raven's face seemed to carry a piece of the weight she felt in her chest. When Chloe opened the door, she found her friend soaked, clutching her suitcase as if it were all she had left. Without a word, she pulled her inside and shut the door against the storm. Minutes later, Raven was curled up on the sofa, wearing a borrowed oversized sweatshirt. Her hair was still damp, her face swollen from crying. On the coffee table, a mug of tea grew cold, untouched. Chloe sat down next to her, her expression a mix of anger and compassion. "I always suspected something," she said almost in a whisper. "Mark was always full of excuses. Last-minute trips. Endless meetings. Ray, he's been with someone else for a long time." Raven squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back more tears. "I feel like such an idiot. I spent weeks planning that party. And in the end, it was all a lie." Chloe held her hand tightly. "What are you going to do now?" Raven shook her head, lost. I don't know. I just feel like the ground has been ripped out from under me. And, with a firm voice, she said, "So, now, you need to focus on what matters." Raven looked at her, confused. "What matters?" "Yes," Chloe nodded. "On your life. On your future." She paused, and then she managed a small smile. "Did you forget? Your interview is tomorrow." Raven blinked, as if trying to process the words. "The interview?" "The job interview, Ray," Chloe reinforced. "The one. For the company you've always dreamed of working for. Hayes Corporation." Silence settled for a few seconds. Raven looked away, fidgeting with the sleeves of her sweatshirt. "I don't know if I'm ready. After all this." Chloe held her face in both hands. "That's exactly why you have to go," she said, looking her straight in the eye. "This is your chance to start over. To prove to yourself that nothing, and no one, is going to destroy you." Raven took a deep breath, and for the first time that night, the word tomorrow didn't sound so far away. Raven appeared timidly in the living room. "Morning," she said, her voice still hoarse. Chloe looked her up and down, raising an eyebrow. "You're going like that?" Raven looked down at her outfit, a baggy cardigan, wide-leg pants and prescription glasses. "What's wrong with it?" Chloe crossed her arms, amused. "You're going in a cardigan with those baggy pants and glasses." Raven gave a sheepish smile. "I left my contacts at Mark's place, and this is the only decent outfit I have right now." Chloe chuckled, shaking her head. "Okay, I'll pretend to understand." Raven made a funny face. "If I'm supposed to impress them with my style, today is not the day." Chloe grabbed a blouse and tossed it to her. "Let's try to fix this before you leave." Raven looked at the blouse. Chloe had given her, but quickly shook her head. "I don't have time to change, Chloe." She grabbed her coffee mug from the table, took a quick sip, nearly choking. "I have to leave now or I'll miss the interview." Chloe watched her, a mix of worry and admiration in her eyes. "Good luck, friend. You're gonna kill it, okay?" Raven smiled, trying to hide her nerves. "Okay, thanks, Chloe." She grabbed her bag, fixed her hair and headed for the door. Raven stepped out of the taxi and stood for a few seconds looking up. Before her, in the beating heart of New York City, stood an imposing skyscraper. Clad entirely in mirrored glass, it reflected the city's motion and the bright morning sun. The name in gold letters at the entrance radiated power. Hayes Corporation, one of the most respected corporations in the country. She took a deep breath, walked up the white marble steps and went inside. The lobby was luxurious, polished granite floors, a massive crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling, and arrangements of white flowers that exuded a soft perfume. At the reception desk, an attendant with a professional smile handed her a silver visitor's pass. "Good morning, ma'am. You can go up to the 38th floor. The elevator is to your left." The elevator was silent, modern, with glass walls that revealed a panoramic view of the city as it ascended. Raven's heart beat faster with every floor. When she arrived, the doors opened to an immaculate hallway, with a light grey carpet, noble wood walls and indirect lighting. The floor's receptionist, dressed in an elegant black suit, checked Raven's name on the list and directed her to the waiting area. Inside, she paused for a moment. About 10 women were seated, all in tailored suits, high heels and flawless makeup. Raven, in her oversized cardigan and wide-leg pants, felt her face flush. A few of them exchanged knowing glances. One of them whispered to another, not bothering to hide it. "That one won't even make it past the door." Muffled giggles filled the room. Raven took a deep breath, trying to ignore them. Minutes later, the door opened. "Miss Raven Gomes," the assistant called out formally. She walked in. The room was spacious, with a stunning view of the city. In the center, a glass table. Behind it, sitting as if he owned the world, was Preston Hayes, a tailored suit, impeccable posture, a firm and confident gaze. Beside him, 2 female executives observed Raven with neutral expressions. And, for an instant, time seemed to slow down. Raven entered the room, trying to maintain her composure. Her hands were sweating, but she offered a polite smile. "Good morning," she said, greeting the woman on the left first, then the one on the right. Everything was going fine, until it was time to greet Preston Hayes. He stood up, tall, imposing, extending his hand. His gaze was so intense that Raven felt her heart leap. She took a step forward, and the fake heel of her flat discreetly caught on the rug. There was no time to regain her balance. She stumbled, and in a split second fell right into his lap, sitting down. Absolute silence filled the room. Preston's strong arms wrapped around her waist, preventing her from falling to the floor. His scent, woody and distinct, enveloped her completely. Their eyes met. For an instant, the world ceased to exist. The air seemed to thicken. The sound of traffic outside faded away, and a strange yet powerful connection shot through both of them. It was as if he knew her, as if that touch had been inevitable. His deep voice broke the moment. "I think that's the most unexpected introduction I've ever had." Raven, still in his lap, felt her face burn. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." He sketched a faint smile without removing his hands from her waist. "Don't worry," he said softly. "It might have been the best part of my morning." The two executives exchanged surprised glances, but for Raven and Preston, in that moment, nothing else mattered. Raven, her hands still trembling, tried to compose herself. She straightened her posture, adjusted her cardigan. But her heart was beating so loudly it seemed to echo in the room. Preston, for his part, didn't take his eyes off her. His gaze was firm, deep, as if he wanted to see right through to her soul. For an instant, the entire room seemed to disappear. There was no receptionist, no two interviewers, just them. He leaned forward slightly. "Miss..." His voice was deep, deliberate, laced with authority. "Gomes?" "Raven Gomes," she replied, swallowing hard. The two women at the table glanced at each other, exchanging a nearly imperceptible look, as if trying to decipher what was happening. He kept his eyes on her, a half-smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair in front of him. Raven sat down, but it was impossible to ignore the energy that seemed to pulse between them. With every question he asked, she felt as if she wasn't just answering, but being tested in a deeper, almost personal way. Her hands were clasped firmly in her lap, but her eyes, they betrayed that something inside her had already changed. And he seemed to know it. He continued the interview, but it wasn't like any other. His questions mixed the professional with the personal, as if he wanted to go beyond her resume, and read her soul. His tone was firm, his gaze intense, and with every answer Raven felt that she wasn't just being evaluated. She was being tested in a way she couldn't explain. When it was over, he leaned back in his chair, and with an enigmatic half-smile, he thanked her. Raven stood up, said goodbye to the two women, and to him. She avoided any prolonged eye contact, but she could feel it, the weight of his gaze, following her every step to the door. Hours later, at Chloe's apartment, Raven was sitting on the sofa, motionless. Her fingers absent-mindedly circled her coffee mug, but her mind was stuck on the interview. "What was that?" she whispered to herself. She sighed, resting her forehead in her hand. "After that fiasco, I know I don't stand a chance." But no matter how hard she tried, the image of him returned, imposing, self-assured, dangerously attractive. The days passed slowly. Raven forced herself not to think about the interview, or the man with the intense eyes. The most she managed was to stick to a routine and help Chloe with things around the apartment until, on a cloudy afternoon, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello?" she answered, her voice cautious. "Miss Raven Gomes?" A firm female voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, this is she. I'm calling from Hayes Corporation. We'd like to inform you that you've been selected for the position." "Congratulations." Raven was silent for a few seconds, her heart racing. I got the job," she repeated, as if needing to confirm she wasn't dreaming. "Yes, miss, welcome to the team." When the call ended, she remained still, a mix of shock, fear, and a spark of excitement running through every part of her body. First day. The mirrored skyscraper of Hayes Corporation reflected the gray New York sky. But inside, the atmosphere was one of absolute luxury. Raven, wearing a loose-knit sweater, a long skirt that nearly dragged on the floor, and her slightly crooked glasses, clutched her bag as she walked to the elevator. She felt out of place. On the 38th floor, the receptionist gave a slight smile. "Mr. Hayes is waiting for you." Her stomach churned, not because of the job, but because of him. When she entered the office, she found Preston behind an imposing dark wood desk. His gaze was different. No enigmatic smiles. His voice was cold, calculated. "You're 3 minutes late," he said, without even fully looking up from his papers. "The elevator," she began nervously. "I don't care about excuses," he interrupted. "Here, 3 minutes can cost millions." She swallowed hard and sat down. "First task, organize contracts and send an urgent report." Simple, until distracted. She dropped half the papers on the floor while trying to stand up. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Miss Gomes, I need an assistant, not a human hurricane." Her face burned. But in less than half an hour, she delivered the revised report, with observations he hadn't noticed. He looked up, surprised. "Who made these notes?" "I did," she answered firmly. A heavy silence settled, and for an instant, something flickered in his eyes, but it quickly vanished. Continue," he said dryly. "In the following days," she remained clumsy. She spilled coffee near a multi-million-dollar contract. She jammed the printer with a paperclip. And she walked into the wrong meeting at the wrong time. But she also closed a deal by anticipating clauses that could have cost millions. And she saved an important negotiation with an unexpected idea. He seemed to be at war with himself, between the irritation at her disorganization and the admiration for her sharp mind, which every now and then disarmed him. The digital clock read 6:47 p.m. The office, nearly silent, was lit only by the cool light filtering through the massive glass windows. Raven was at her desk typing furiously. On a nearby counter was a stack of documents Preston Hayes had requested. For 5 o'clock. His office door swung open forcefully. He emerged, impeccable as always, dark suit, tie perfectly knotted, and a gaze that seemed to weigh a ton. "Miss Gomes?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I asked for these reports at 5. Raven blinked, glanced at the clock, and tried to maintain a smile. "I know. But there was a problem with the system and—" He held up a hand, cutting her off. "I'm not interested. We don't work with excuses here. Only results." She took a deep breath, swallowing hard. She picked up the folder, walked over to him and held out the papers. "Here it is. I checked it 3 times. It's all perfect." He didn't let her finish. He took a step closer, his gaze firm and low. "If you can't deliver on time next time, your days here will be numbered." Her heart pounded. Of course, Mr. Hayes. It won't happen again," she stammered, feeling the words trip over themselves. He took the documents, turned, and went back into his office without another word. Raven stood there for a few seconds, trying to catch her breath. Then she returned to her desk, muttering to herself with a bitter smile, "What a cold, arrogant man. This is not going to be easy." In the cozy comfort of Chloe's apartment, a warm light filled the living room. Raven and Chloe were sitting on the sofa, each holding a glass of wine, the soft sound of it being poured filling the air. Chloe broke the silence with a curious smile. "So, tell me, how's the new job?" Raven let out a light, slightly embarrassed laugh. "Oh, Chloe, it's a total comedy over here." She took a sip of wine, adjusting herself on the sofa as the dim lights cast soft shadows around them. "I spilled coffee on a $1 million contract, right in front of the boss. It was a complete disaster." Chloe's laughter filled the apartment, almost making the glasses clink. "Oh, Raven, you are the queen of mishaps, aren't you?" "There's more," Raven continued, a crooked smile on her face. "In an important meeting, I played the wrong video for the clients." Chloe couldn't hold back her laughter, her cackle echoing through the room. "Wow, you never stop, do you?" "I'm trying to get better, I promise," Raven said, shaking her head. "But it feels like I only make things worse." Chloe raised her glass in a cheerful toast. "Well, at least you're persistent." After a sip, Chloe changed her tone, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "And your gorgeous boss? Tell me, what's he like?" Raven nearly choked on her wine, coughed, and composed herself. Gorgeous, forget it. He's nothing like the man from the interview. She paused dramatically, choosing her words carefully. He's cold as ice, arrogant enough to be scary, calculating, and has a look that can cut you in half. Chloe's eyes widened, thoroughly amused. Wow, that's intense, huh? Raven sighed, looking at the glass in her hands. Yeah, but I still smile, do my job, and try not to think about it too much. Chloe took a generous sip of wine, a playful smile on her lips. Oh, but let me tell you something. Raven looked at her, curious, momentarily forgetting her work problems. You know that cute guy I told you about? Chloe continued, her eyes shining. I went out with him last night. Raven raised an eyebrow, amused. Seriously? And how was it? Chloe laughed, shaking her head. It was great. A little awkward at first, but fun. She toasted her friend, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. To life's surprises. Can't new beginnings, Raven smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. To surprises and new beginnings. After the toast, Chloe looked at Raven, part sly, part conspiratorial. You know, Ray, my friend from work has been asking about you. Raven almost choked on her wine again, looking away, flustered. Oh, Chloe, I'm not interested in any men right now. She paused, her voice growing softer, almost a whisper. After that fiasco at Mark's birthday, I just want to focus on work. Chloe noticed the change in tone but didn't push it. I get it. Raven smiled, but her eyes grew distant, as if reliving a moment she kept only for herself, the day her boss held her, in that imposing office. That unexpected, silent connection. She said nothing, but that moment remained vivid. Even amidst his distance and coldness, the two friends ended the night with light laughter, forgetting their worries, with the promise that, despite the challenges, better days were ahead. A few weeks later, the pace at Hayes Corporation was growing more intense. Raven had already grown accustomed to the long hours, and Preston Hayes's relentless demands. That night the clock read almost 10. The city of New York outside was covered in the yellow glow of streetlights, and the silence of the ED executive floor was broken only by the distant sound of an elevator ascending. Preston had an important meeting the next day, so Raven stayed late organizing reports and contracts. The stack of documents was finally ready. With quiet steps, she walked to his office to leave everything on his desk. The low light gave the space an even more imposing air. The mirrored glass reflected the city outside, and a faint scent of whiskey hung in the air. Without realizing it, Raven was so focused on not dropping anything that she only noticed his presence as she was about to leave. Working late, Miss Gomes? His deep voice cut through the silence. She turned slowly, and there he was, sitting in an armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze more intense than she had ever seen it. I was just getting the reports ready for tomorrow, she replied, feeling her breath quicken. He rose slowly, each step measured as if he had all the time in the world. He stopped right in front of her, so close that Raven could feel the warmth of his breath. Preston's gaze traveled over her face, until it rested on her lips. With an unexpected gesture, he traced them with his fingertips, softly, almost without touching, as if he wanted to commit that moment to memory. You work too hard, Raven, he murmured, his voice low and heavy. She could tell by the slight unsteadiness in his eyes that he wasn't just tired, but slightly affected by the alcohol. Still, there was something in that moment, something that made the air between them feel heavy, almost electric. For a second, time seemed to stop. But Preston took a step back, raising the glass to his lips. You may go, Miss Gomes. Tomorrow will be a long day, he said, resuming his usual cold tone. Raven left, feeling her heart pound, and not understanding why that arrogant man could affect her so much. A few weeks went by, and since that night in the office, Preston Hayes had behaved as if absolutely nothing had happened. No different glances, no comments. It was as if that intense moment had been just a blur in his memory, or worse, something he chose to erase. Until Thursday arrived, the sound of heels echoed through the halls of Hayes Corporation, mixed with the hushed murmur of conversations and the distant clinking of mugs in the break room. Everyone tried to look busy, but the CEO's mere presence was enough to make the air heavy. Raven was rushing, balancing a stack of contracts in her arms and a poorly placed coffee cup on top. Bad idea. The elevator doors opened. She walked in without looking and bumped into someone. The collision was inevitable. The coffee flew. The papers scattered across the floor like confetti on New Year's Eve. And Preston, Hayes's impeccable dark grey suit, was splattered with the hot beverage. Her heart stopped. He, on the other hand, just looked down at his jacket, calmly wiping it off, his expression unchanged. Suddenly he looked up and said, his voice deep and firm, "Miss Gomez, pack your bags. Tomorrow at 7 in the morning, we fly to a business conference in the Bahamas." She blinked, confused. "A conference? I'm going too?" But he had already turned, walking down the hall. "Of course, and don't be late," he said without even looking back. Raven remained kneeling on the floor, surrounded by wet contracts, trying to process what had just happened. That night, the apartment was filled with the sound of clattering hangers and the excited voice of Chloe, who watched her friend rummage through her drawers. "Are you kidding me, Ray?" Chloe held up a shapeless, baggy blouse. "You're going to the Bahamas, girl. Not a spiritual retreat." Raven, cringing, tried to justify herself. "I'm going to work." "Chloe, conferences, meetings. It has nothing to do with the beach." Chloe rolled her eyes, already pulling the baggiest dresses out of the suitcase. "Work, yes, but also breathe a little, for God's sake." And she started packing light, colorful dresses and bikinis. Raven's eyes widened. "I packed a discreet one-piece." "I know, and I took it out," Chloe said with a mischievous grin. "You have a beautiful body. Why are you hiding it?" Because I don't want to attract attention," she protested, laughing nervously. "Attract whose attention, huh?" Chloe raised an eyebrow, as if she already knew the answer. Raven looked away. "No one's. I just want to focus on work." Chloe zipped up the suitcase with a triumphant smile. "Focus on work, sure. But if your millionaire boss happens to notice, well, that's a different story." Raven sighed, pretending not to hear. Inside, the image of him in the office that night still burned in her memory. The next day, the trip to the Bahamas started early. At the airport, Preston Hayes was on the phone, speaking firmly. "Close the deal with the subsidiary." "I don't want any delays," he said, without even glancing to the side. Raven, holding her backpack, tried to keep up with his pace. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes." He just nodded, still focused on his calls. "Let's go. Boarding has started." Inside the plane, she settled into the seat next to him, trying not to seem nervous. Preston noticed her fumbling with the seatbelt. "First time flying?" he asked, giving her a quick glance. "Yeah. I've never even been inside an airport before." She smiled sheepishly. He leaned in a little. "Relax, nothing's going to happen." "Easy for you to say," she muttered, and he raised an eyebrow, almost smiling. The takeoff began. She kept her eyes closed. He watched her for a few seconds, and then went back to looking out the window, distant. When they arrived in the Bahamas, the warm air and the smell of the sea filled their senses. At the entrance of the five-star hotel, he handed her the keys to a suite. "Get some rest, Miss Gomes. Tomorrow will be busy." "But what about work?" she asked. "Tomorrow. Today, just relax," he said, already walking away to answer another call. Entering the suite, Raven stopped at the door. "Wow," she whispered, looking at the huge balcony with an ocean view. She video-called Chloe. "Chloe, you have no idea. This suite is enormous." "And the hot boss? Is he around?" Chloe teased. "Probably in the lobby, surrounded by people, as always." In the closet, she started looking for something to wear. She picked out a discreet black one-piece, but then remembered the suitcase her friend had packed. "Seriously, Chloe?" She held up a blue bikini that was barely there. "Wear that one." Chloe laughed. "You're going to the pool, not a convent?" Raven sighed, ended the call, and finally put on the bikini. She threw a light cover-up over it, grabbed a book, and went downstairs. The late afternoon sun made the pool water shimmer like liquid gold. Preston Hayes was by the poolside, talking to two investors, a glass of water in his hand. That's when he saw her. Raven Gomes was walking along the wooden deck, wearing a light beach dress and a blue bikini, the one Chloe had practically forced her to pack. Her still damp hair fell loose, her skin golden from the sun. She looked for a free spot, and when she found a lounge chair, she started to take off the dress, revealing the bikini. It was at that moment that a blonde surfer, sitting in the chair next to her, struck up a conversation. "First time in the Bahamas?" he asked, smiling. "First time, and I'm already in love with the place," Raven replied, sitting down and adjusting her towel. The surfer made another comment, and she laughed, a real laugh with her head tilted back slightly. Preston stopped talking. Her laugh made something tighten in his chest. Where was the cardigan, the baggy clothes, and the huge glasses that hid half her face? It was as if the invisible assistant from the office had disappeared, and in her place was a woman he couldn't ignore. Who is this guy? Why is she laughing like that? It didn't make sense. She had never drawn attention like this at Hayes Corporation. But now it was impossible not to look, and impossible to accept that she was smiling at someone else. Without thinking, he crossed the deck. "Miss Gomes?" His voice came out deeper than he intended. She looked up, surprised. "Mr. Hayes?" His gaze flicked from the surfer to her. "Remember, we have an early meeting tomorrow." "I suggest you get some rest," he said dryly. "I thought we were free to enjoy the afternoon." She raised an eyebrow, keeping her tone calm. He gave a humorless half-smile. "I've changed my mind." She didn't look away. And in that instant, Preston Hayes had the strange feeling that he was the one at a disadvantage. He walked back to the penthouse with stiff steps, ignoring the calls from the investors. He threw his phone on the bed, loosened his tie, and poured himself a generous whiskey. Ridiculous. Why am I like this? She was just his assistant, the girl who tripped in the hallways, spilled coffee on his suit, wore clothes that were too baggy, and hid behind giant glasses. But at the pool she was none of those things. And that bikini, that smile. It shouldn't bother him, but it did. A lot. He cancelled his dinner with the investors, something he never did, and spent the evening sending short messages to Raven, asking for files and reports he didn't even need, an excuse to remind her that he was still the boss, as if that would make her invisible again. Except she didn't reply immediately. And that irritated him even more. Hours later, when the penthouse door opened, he was sitting in the leather armchair, a fresh glass of whiskey in hand, staring intently at the entrance. Raven walked in, smiling to herself, still radiating the energy from the pool. But she froze when she saw him. "Mr. Hayes, what are you doing here?" He raised an eyebrow, a slow smile forming. "This is my penthouse." He took a sip of whiskey. "And yours too. They put us in here together. Is there a problem?" She hesitated. "No, I just wasn't expecting it." "Are you afraid of me?" he asked, his voice low, almost challenging. "You can relax. I'm not going to try anything." His eyes said otherwise. Raven lifted her chin as if refusing to be intimidated. She walked slowly through the living room, untying the sarong she wore as a skirt, letting the fabric slide down her legs. She took the towel from her shoulders, revealing the still damp bikini, and headed for the bathroom. She stopped at the door, looked over her shoulder, and said, "Afraid? I think you're the one who should be." She went into the bathroom and closed the door, leaving him alone with the distant sound of the shower, and a turmoil he no longer knew how to control. The sound of the shower echoed from the bathroom, but Preston Hayes couldn't take his eyes off the door. 1 minute, Raven irritated him. The next, she fascinated him, and after seeing her at the pool without the cardigan, without the baggy clothes and huge glasses, something in his chest tightened in a way he didn't want to admit. The door opened slowly. She came out wrapped in a towel, her face flushed, droplets of water still trickling down her neck. She looked to the side. But he was no longer there. Alone in the suite, Raven sat on the edge of the bed, trying to understand. What was that all about? She muttered to herself. She picked up her phone and called Chloe. "Chloe, you have no idea what just happened. From the sound of your voice, I bet it involves that millionaire boss of yours," Chloe teased. Raven sighed. "It's just, he showed up at the pool out of nowhere. He was all serious, pulled me away from some surfer with the most ridiculous excuse, and then he just disappeared." "Jealousy," Chloe said without a second thought. "You think so? I don't get him. 1 minute he ignores me, the next, He does this. Did you at least get the surfer's number? Chloe laughed. Raven burst out laughing. Of course not. It was just a conversation. After she hung up, she spent a few minutes staring at the ceiling. The huge bed, soft sheets, but what wouldn't let her relax was the memory of him, standing there, looking at her as if she were a different person. She sighed, rolled onto her side and let her mind wander. She imagined what it would be like if he came back, if he knocked on the door, if he said he couldn't pretend anymore. She smiled to herself, feeling her heart race at the mere thought. The next morning, she walked into the meeting room with her hair still damp and a simple floral dress. That lit something in him. Good morning, she said, placing her folder on the table. Preston Hayes responded only with a curt nod. Raven sat down beside him, opening her folder calmly, unintimidated by his calculating gaze. The investors flipped through their folders, and Preston, sitting at the head of the table, maintained an impassive expression. Beside him, Raven smoothed her simple floral dress and opened her laptop. So, as I mentioned in the previous agenda, she began. No, Preston interrupted, not looking at her. First, we need to review these numbers. They're out of proportion. She took a deep breath. Actually, they're correct, she countered, turning the screen to show him. The projection is in line with the latest data. His gaze lingered on her, as if he couldn't believe she would dare to contradict him there, in front of everyone. Even so, I want them re-evaluated, he said dryly. Continue. She didn't back down. As I was saying, she resumed firmly, ignoring his tone, if we consider the current indices, the growth margin for the next quarter will be at least 12%. One of the investors, an older gentleman with grey hair, nodded in satisfaction. Impressive. That's exactly the kind of analysis we needed to hear. Preston's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. For the rest of the meeting, she answered questions clearly, explained technical details, and maintained an impeccable posture, giving him no room to silence her again. At the end, as everyone stood up to say their goodbyes, one of the investors approached Preston, discreetly watching Raven gather her papers. Your assistant is charming. She has a lightness about her. It's different. Preston smiled out of pure politeness, but inside, something twisted into a knot in his stomach. He didn't want to admit it, but he had noticed the exact same thing since the day before, and he hated knowing he wasn't the only one. The man then tilted his head slightly, lowering his voice. Do you know if she has a boyfriend? Preston didn't think twice. She does, he replied curtly, firmly, as if setting a boundary. And if you don't want any trouble, I suggest you take your eyes off her. The investor let out a low, slightly awkward laugh. Understood. Preston just gave a final handshake and walked away, feeling his own blood boil. He had no idea why that question had bothered him so much, or maybe he knew all too well. As they walked through the ballroom door, he approached Raven, who was still collecting some papers. Wear something nice tonight. We're having dinner, he said quietly, his voice laced with command. She looked up, surprised. Dinner, here? Yes, he confirmed, not breaking his gaze. 7 o'clock. Raven just nodded, trying not to show the chill that ran down her spine. Hours later, alone in the suite, she stared at her own reflection. Her trembling hands adjusted an emerald green dress with thin straps, simple, but it hugged her body in a way she rarely dared to show. She pinned back part of her hair, leaving the rest loose and lightly waved. A wine-colored lipstick completed the look. As she went down to the resort's restaurant, the soft sound of the waves came from a distance. Preston was already waiting, impeccable in a dark grey suit without a tie. But what really disarmed her was his gaze. It wasn't professional nor distant. It was intense, almost hungry. You look... He paused for a moment, taking in every detail. Beautiful! Raven felt her face warm. Thank you. You look very handsome. Too. They tried to start with neutral conversation, she commenting on the beaches, he talking about the local cuisine. But there was something in the air. Their eyes met more often than they should have, and at one point, as she leaned over to pick up her napkin, her fingers brushed against his. It was quick, but enough to make them both freeze for a second. He stared at her. You have a knack for showing up when I least expect it. Raven laughed softly. That's a strange way of calling me clumsy. He smiled, but there was something more in his eyes. Maybe, but now I think I find myself waiting for you to show up. After dinner, they walked through the garden, illuminated by soft yellow lights. The sea breeze carried the salty scent and the distant sound of the waves. Under a large almond tree, Preston stopped. "Raven?" he said, as if trying to figure her out. She looked up. "What is it?" Preston didn't think twice. He took a step closer, cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was a kiss that was both firm and tender, demanding and gentle. It was a kiss that spoke of weeks of unspoken tension, of confused feelings, and of a desire he could no longer hide. Raven felt the world spin. For a moment she forgot who they were, boss and assistant, chaos and order. There was only the warmth of his lips, the strength of his hands, and the certainty that nothing would ever be the same. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I think," he started, his voice hoarse. "We should go back." Raven just nodded, unable to find her voice. That night, sleep seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the ghost of a kiss that had changed everything. The next morning, Preston appeared in the resort lobby, wearing sunglasses and a white shirt unbuttoned at the top. "Raven?" His deep voice cut through the lobby's buzz. "Boat trip today. It's part of the schedule. Are you going?" She adjusted the clipboard she was carrying, keeping her eyes on the papers. "If it's part of the conference, of course I'm going," she replied professionally. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her. "Then, I'll see you at the pier," he said before walking away with firm steps. The late morning sun made the water sparkle like a blue mirror. The boat rocked gently, tied to the dock. Raven boarded wearing a light dress and sunglasses, politely greeting the other attendees. Preston was already there, leaning against the railing, white shirt with the top buttons undone, watching the sea. "Punctual," he commented as she approached. "Always," she replied curtly, going to sit on a side bench. The tour began. Salty breeze, laughter in the background, cameras flashing. Preston tried to start a conversation about the beauty of the region, but she answered with short sentences, until a stronger wave rocked the boat. Raven lost her balance. A small gasp escaped her, and in a quick reflex, Preston caught her firmly by the waist. "Careful," he murmured, not letting go immediately. She straightened up, but noticed he was still holding her. "I'm okay now," she said, her voice a little softer. Their eyes met. For a few seconds, the rest of the world ceased to exist. The sound of the waves, the conversations in the background. Nothing mattered. Preston only let go slowly, as if he didn't want to. He went back to leaning against the railing, but he kept his eyes on her, as if he could still feel the warmth of her touch. And there on the rocking sea, with the sun on their faces, Preston Hayes knew he was lost. The way he looked at her while he held her, the way his fingers lingered before letting go. Raven felt it. Even without words, there was something burning there. But like everything involving Preston Hayes, nothing was simple. He retreated again. The next morning, Raven woke up to a small white envelope left on the floor, propped against her suite door. She opened it carefully. "Thank you for yesterday." His handwriting was firm, impeccable. In the bottom corner, just his initials, PH, nothing more. No message, no call. A polite note. Cold as always, Raven thought, feeling that tightness in her chest. She tried not to let it get to her. She tried to tell herself it was better this way, that she shouldn't expect anything from him, and that it would never work out. But her heart no longer listened. The closing cocktail party, for the conference was filled with soft lights and laughter that floated on the warm night air. Raven stepped out of the car in an emerald green dress that highlighted her brown eyes and her loose hair, which shone under the moonlight. She felt the weight of his gaze on her. Preston Hayes, impeccable in a dark suit, seemed even more imposing by her side. As soon as they arrived, a tall, charismatic man approached her with an open smile. "Raven, what a pleasure to see you here," he said, extending his hand. She smiled gently, accepting the handshake. "The pleasure is all mine. The conference is amazing, isn't it?" "Without a doubt. And you seem to be enjoying it more than expected." Raven laughed, casually touching his arm. It's important to enjoy the good moments, isn't it? I agree. May I join you for a glass of wine? The investor asked with an interested look. So of course, let's go, she replied, following him with a calm smile. Across the room, Preston watched everything. He saw her smile, her relaxed manner, the light touch on the investor's arm. A flame began to burn in his chest. His blood boiled. He tried to hide it. He drank a little more than usual, responded to greetings with mechanical smiles. But his attention never left Raven. Every gesture, every laugh, every exchange of glances, it was all etched in his eyes. He couldn't take it anymore. He approached, his voice harsh. "We need to talk." She followed him to an isolated balcony, the muffled sound of the party fading behind them. "What was that, Preston?" she asked, surprised. "Are you crazy?" He closed the glass door behind them, facing her with a contained fury. "Are you having fun, is that it? Are you trying to provoke me?" Raven's eyes widened. "Provoke you? I was just talking to him." He took a firm step forward. "You know what you're doing. And I don't like seeing you like this. With someone else." The words slipped out before he could control them, and the silence that followed hung heavily between them. She crossed her arms, trying to hide her trembling. "You don't have that right, Preston." "We're nothing." He was silent for a moment, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "I know, but I can't pretend I don't care anymore." Raven stared at him, surprised. "Ever since we got here, everything's changed. You've changed, and it's driving me crazy." She took a deep breath. "I haven't changed. You just started to see me. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly, very slowly moved closer. When he was close enough for her to feel his breath, he whispered, "Tell me you don't feel the same. Tell me this is all in my head." Raven hesitated, wanting to say yes, that it was all his imagination, but she couldn't. "I feel it. But I don't want to be a whim of yours. I'm not that. I'm not just a distraction." He frowned, hurt. "You think that's what I see in you?" She answered firmly, without wavering. "I think even you don't know what you see." He took a step back. The silence between them was heavy, full of doubts and unsaid truths. She turned to leave, but he grabbed her arm firmly but gently. "Give me a chance, Raven, just one. Let's have dinner. No games, no company business. Just you and me." She stared at him for long seconds. His face was serious, sincere. "One chance. Just one." She left, leaving Preston Hayes alone on the balcony. For the first time, he was afraid he wouldn't be good enough. That night, dinner was different. He chose a small restaurant outside the hotel, where they wouldn't be recognized. The table was near the sea, lit by candles, while a gentle breeze tousled Raven's hair. "Do you always choose places like this?" she asked, looking around. "No, only when I want the night to be unforgettable," he replied firmly, his eyes never leaving hers. Raven swallowed hard, looking out at the sea, but an involuntary smile escaped her. He spoke less about business and more about himself. The more he opened up, the more the cold, arrogant man seemed to dissolve. After dinner, they walked along the beach, barefoot, the cool sand and the sound of the waves breaking the silence. Preston Hayes slowly took her hand, as if afraid of scaring her away. "What if someone sees us?" she whispered, more to tease than out of fear. "Let them see," he replied with a half-smile. In the middle of their walk, he stopped. He turned to her, held her face in both hands, and kissed her. It was a firm but controlled kiss, filled with everything they hadn't yet said. Raven felt the world spin. They returned to the hotel in silence, not one of distance but of surrender. The taste of his kiss still burned on her skin. The second kiss came at the hotel room door, deeper, more urgent. His hands roamed her face and neck, as if wanting to memorize every detail. She reciprocated, pulling him by the collar of his shirt, feeling the growing heat between them. He led her to the bed with slow steps, but his eyes betrayed how much he wanted to be there. Raven felt her heart race, each touch more intense than the last. Between soft laughter, quickened breaths, and hands that found each other in the dark, the night became theirs. Every gesture was a silent confession, every touch a promise. When the sun began to kiss the penthouse window, Raven opened her eyes. She felt light, as if she had left her fears behind. Beside her, Preston Hayes was sleeping, his face serene, unlike any expression she had ever seen on him. Unable to resist, she ran her fingers over his stubble. He slowly opened his eyes and smiled, not the calculated smile of business, but a real one. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Good morning," she replied almost in a whisper. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other. The answer to what had changed was simple: everything. Breakfast was light, filled with laughter and subtle touches. The invisible barrier that had separated them seemed to have disappeared. Hours later at the airport, leaving the Bahamas had a bittersweet taste. As they boarded the private jet, Preston Hayes took her hand before she even sat down. Raven looked at him, surprised, but said nothing, just intertwined her fingers with his. This time there was no distance between them. The flight back was easy. They sat side by side, exchanging knowing smiles. They talked quietly, shared earbuds, laughed at the blurry photos on her phone, and even napped, leaning against each other. Anyone looking would never have guessed that this man, once so cold, now seemed unwilling to let her go for anything. When the plane landed in New York, he kissed the back of her hand gently. "Things are going to be different now," he said firmly. She smiled, feeling that yes, they were about to start something new. A few hours later, Raven walked into her apartment carrying her suitcase, but with a sparkle in her eyes that Chloe noticed instantly. "Tell me everything." Her friend practically jumped off the sofa, tossing her laptop aside. Raven tried to play it cool, but a smile escaped. "Chloe, he's fallen for me, and he was jealous." "I knew it." Chloe clapped her hands, cheering as if she were the main character. "Spill." Raven sighed, sitting down beside her. "He asked me to dinner, but it wasn't about the company, you know. It was different. A true gentleman. We talked, we laughed. And we had a wonderful night." Chloe's eyes widened. "Wonderful as in—" "Wonderful?" Raven laughed softly. "As in, he looked at me and said he wants to be a different man for me." "Ray," Chloe took her hand, emotional. "I don't think he's just fallen for you. I think that man is head over heels in love with you." The months went by, and Raven discovered that true love wasn't just the butterflies in her stomach. It was also peace. It was knowing she could be herself, laugh out loud, walk around in silly pajamas, be a terrible cook, and still be looked at as if she were the most fascinating woman in the world. She was still a bit clumsy. She still tripped sometimes, dropped things, fumbled her words. And Preston Hayes. He would just laugh and say, "Don't change a thing." "Ray, this is exactly how I love you." Preston Hayes, for his part, seemed like a different man. The armor, the walls, the coldness, it was all gone. The demanding, distant executive had given way to someone who woke up kissing her shoulders, who learned to make foamy coffee just because she liked it, who would pause meetings to take her to the rooftop to watch the sunset together. Sometimes he would show up to pick her up from home by surprise. Other times he would prepare dinner and say with that crooked smile, "Tonight, it's my turn to take care of you." He was a true gentleman, romantic, attentive, respectful of her time and space. But above all, he made sure to show her how important she was. Chloe, her best friend, watched it all unfold and celebrated every new milestone. "Ray, you know you're living a fairy tale, right?" she'd say, holding her hand with a sparkle in her eyes. "And the best part? It's real." Raven would smile because deep down she knew. It wasn't just love. It was partnership, care, and a feeling that grew stronger every day. On their one-year anniversary, he invited her back to the Bahamas. That night he asked her to get dressed up. He just said, "Tonight is special." Raven, unsuspecting, chose a simple green dress that she knew he loved. When she arrived, she found a rooftop garden decorated with golden fairy lights, white petals on the floor, and soft music playing in the background. In the center, a table for two and Preston in a suit waiting with a nervous smile. "What is all this?" she asked, laughing and crying at the same time. He didn't answer right away. He pulled out her chair, poured wine with trembling hands, and waited for the music to fade. Then he stood up, took a velvet box from his pocket and got down on one beanie. "Raven, I thought I had everything, but then you showed up and showed me what it means to have a home. You see me as more than a name on a building or in a bank account. I know I'm complicated, that I sometimes shut down for no reason. But with you, I want to learn to be better every day. I can't imagine a day without you by my side. He opened the box, revealing a simple, delicate ring, exactly the kind she always said she liked. Will you marry me? Raven brought her hands to her face, trying to hold back the tears. Of course, yes, Preston. Of course, yes. He lifted her off the ground and hugged her tightly, as if he wanted to sear that moment into his soul. The kiss was sweet and passionate, full of silent promises. That night, they slept with celebratory hearts, already dreaming of the future, of the altar of their vows, and of the certainty that fate had improbably brought together a clumsy assistant and an arrogant millionaire to live the most beautiful love story. The church bells rang softly, accompanying the delicate melody of the orchestra. The centuries-old cathedral, with its stained-glass windows and imposing columns, was decorated with white lilies and orchids, under a red carpet that stretched from the door to the altar. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, while golden lights warmed every corner. It was a scene worthy of a fairy tale, only better because it was real. At the altar, Preston waited, a tailored navy blue suit, impeccable posture, but in his eyes a man on the verge of breaking, down with emotion. When the doors opened, a hush fell over the church. Raven appeared. A white dress of delicate lace, a sweetheart neckline, a long princess-like veil, and eyes that shone with the light of a woman in love. She walked arm in arm with her father, who made no effort to hide his tears. To the side, Chloe, maid of honor, was already crying before the bride even reached the altar. Preston didn't blink, as if everything else had disappeared. And maybe it had. When she stopped before him, they exchanged a look that said it all. Against all odds, we made it. It was time for the vows. Preston asked to go first. He held her hands, took a deep breath, and smiled faintly. Raven, I never imagined that the love of my life would be the woman who walked into my company a little lost, spilling coffee, tripping over her own feet, and apologizing 1,000 times. But if I could choose, I would live every second all over again, every misstep, every moment of confusion, just to get to you. In the end, you taught me what light-hearted love is, what it is to laugh in the middle of chaos, what peace is in the middle of a storm. Before God and everyone here, I promise to protect you, to listen to you, to respect you, and to love you with my actions every day of my life. Raven was already crying when she began to speak. Preston, when I walked into Hayes Corporation, I thought it was just another job, and that you were just another difficult boss. But God had other plans. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You gave me a voice when no one else would listen, and you loved me even when I didn't think I deserved it. Today, before everyone, I promise to be your shelter, your partner in victory and in chaos, and I will love you with truth, with patience, with faith, and with this goofy smile you say, you love so much. A collective sigh went through the church. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Preston didn't wait for the traditional, "You may now kiss the bride." He pulled her in slowly, with that firm and passionate way of his, and kissed her, as if the whole world was there just to witness it. And deep down, maybe it was, married life began with ease, shared smiles in the kitchen, stolen kisses between meetings, and nights wrapped in whispered promises just for them. Preston Hayes, the man who was once cold and unapproachable, now melted just seeing her smile. And Raven, she discovered a new world within that love, a world where she was cared for, respected, and loved just as she had always dreamed. A few months after the wedding, the news came that changed everything. Preston, "I'm pregnant," she said, her eyes shining. He was speechless for a few seconds, and then he laughed like a child. And when the ultrasound revealed they were having twin girls, he sank onto the sofa, running his hands over his face and saying, "My God, my heart isn't going to handle this much love all at once." Time passed, and the little ones came into the world, healthy and with a sparkle in their eyes. Two little girls with dark hair and mischievous smiles, who quickly became the center of everything. The once silent penthouse was transformed into a home filled with laughter, drawings on the walls and toys scattered on the floor, but above all filled with love. Chloe, the godmother, to both was always there, helping, caring, and celebrating every new family milestone. And if anyone were to ask Preston Hayes what changed his life, he wouldn't hesitate. A woman named Raven. Then the sweet, clumsy way she walked into my world. And so, between kisses, diapers, cuddles, and so much love, they were happy, truly, forever. And tell me, would you give an arrogant boss a chance if he loved you like that? If this story touched your heart, leave your rating from 1 to 10. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and follow other love stories just like this one. Thank you for your time. May God bless you and your family. And until the next story,